Welcome everyone. I'll be presenting about performance analytics, and I'll be focusing more on the fundamentals of performance analytics in this presentation. And the goal of that is to help you, to give you an overview of the features in performance analytics, the purpose of the application, and also how some of these features work. And I'll be mentioning some more advanced use cases as well, but I will not be going in depth on those. Like I said, please, as I'm going through, feel free to just please say your name and then ask any questions that you may have. We'll start with, so this introduction, I'm going to be explaining what is performance analytics, how does it work, and also a comparison and some clarification about the differences of analytics and reporting. What is it? So usually when a lot of customers don't, maybe they need some additional clarification. So yeah, so we have reporting. So why do we need performance analytics? What is it? And sometimes the easiest way to just show is to show them a dashboard and then kind of explain some of the limitations of reporting as well. But ultimately, what this application does is it visualizes. So as you can see here on the right-hand side, I have a demo instance. And so you can visualize business processes, performance trends, and you can summarize data so that you can achieve continual service improvement. So you can monitor how you're doing and then make improvements. So, and a lot of customers also ask, so what, like, why can't I just use another business intelligence tool? And that's when we highlight some of the benefits of performance analytics, and we explain how it's an in-platform solution. You don't have to create integrations to export data from ServiceNow into another application outside of ServiceNow, and you can visualize a lot of this data real time. It's not like you have to wait for a scheduled job to export the data or worry about building an integration. And then you can be proactive, so you can. I'll show you a little later some of the features like creating targets and thresholds so that you can notify stakeholders. For example, if you hit an all-time high or an all-time low, or if you hit a certain number in something that you're tracking, right? So an example would be maybe you want to make sure that your average resolution time goes from 5 hours to 1 hour. Then that's something that you could start to see if you're moving toward that goal, and you could be notified at some point either before you reach it or when you reach it. This is a ServiceNow provided graphic that just again just shows some of the benefits of performance analytics in ServiceNow versus having a separate application. Like, for example, the one that comes up a lot is like Power BI or Tableau. A lot of customers use those as well. And so yeah, no offloading data. You see it real time. It's in ServiceNow, and also the access to the data. So even though you can see certain scores, you can also drill down to records, as I'll show you. That's also controlled by ACLs. So the records you can actually see would be the same ones that you would be able to see if you went to the table to look at them. And then some of the questions that performance analytics helps to answer, all of these here. So where were we before? Did we improve? Do we want to be somewhere else? And so you can see where we are today also by looking at some of these graphs. And then you can start also forecasting or making plans for the future, right? So part of that continual service improvement, you can try to achieve a certain goal. And a lot of so as you can see here on the right hand side, we have some graphs here. These would be like trend lines. You can put more than one indicator, and I'll explain more what the indicators are in a bit, but you can put them on the same graph, and you can visualize them in different ways. So when I go into to a workshop, for example, usually one important part to highlight and try to get the customer to focus on is that, yeah, you can create indicators on almost anything, but ultimately we're trying to create dashboards that are useful to certain stakeholders or personas in the organization. So my next slide here is just to highlight. So there are these different personas at an organization. you usually want to ask, so who's the audience of this dashboard? Because these personas will not be interested in the same kinds of indicators. So they're not really interested in seeing the same information, and they honestly probably shouldn't be. So when you're creating a dashboard for an executive, you wouldn't include the same kind of information or metrics that you would for a frontline worker or a service owner. But then ultimately, if you think of this as a whole, then the indicators that your frontline workers should be trying to, or the metrics that they should be trying to achieve, right? The indicators or the goals that they're trying to meet should in some way also roll up and make sense for the service owner. So the service owner is probably more concerned with lowering the mean time to resolve by 10%. And in order to do that, the frontline worker will have to try to avoid incident reassignments or having incidents that are older than 30 days. And the executive may want to lower, they're more concerned with high level objectives. So for example, they may be more interested in improving in reducing cost or in improving performance, higher level targets. So usually you'll see a lot of more higher level indicators here at the executive level. And then here I just have some examples of different widgets. So widgets are these boxes here in a dashboard. So you can have multiple widgets on a dashboard of maybe how they would be different. Let's get into how performance analytics works. There are really three steps for, and this is from the perspective of someone from a technical of a technical consultant implementing performance analytics. When we go in, we really try to determine what the indicators for the specific audience that we're working with will be, and there are actually some resources that can help you with that. So the main one, the content packs that ServiceNow provides. So just to give you an idea, I'll just go into the plugins here. So usually what you would want to do is once they have Performance Analytics Premium, that's one prerequisite here. PA Premium has to be enabled in the instance that you'll want to do this. Otherwise, the complimentary version of Performance Analytics only gives you access to what's available for incident management. You can't create any new functionality. It's just what you see, and it's to get a taste of what performance analytics is. Once PA Premium is enabled, it can be enabled in sub-production instances as well. So you could have a customer enable it to test it in dev, for example, without having to incur a cost. But once it's enabled in production, then they would be, of course, paying for it. So the plugins, so performance analytics, content packs, you'll see here that there are a lot of content packs for different applications, and you're also welcome to test them out in your developer instance. Of course, you're going to have to, you can enable performance analytics in your development instance through that instance page. You just have to go to actions, and you wouldn't enable it through this view. So you would just do it through that the developer page, and then you can, for specific applications, so they have, ServiceNow provides dashboards with automated indicators as well, so that you can enable them, and you get, for example, you would get like this dashboard IT executive, it comes out of the box. So if you wanted to, as a demonstrate to a customer, look at the kinds of dashboards that we could create, or like, let's review this. I mean, are there things here that you're not interested in, or other things that you may want? That's a good starting point. Also, if you have customers who really don't know what kind of key performance indicators they want to measure, so what they're trying to measure, you can, there's also this resource called kpilibrary.com, where you can get these are just for information technology, but you can get a lot of different examples for potential key performance indicators that a customer may be interested in. So what you would do is, first step, create indicators, and then after that, you create the indicator, and you have to collect the data. So I'll go through that process, but it's essentially a scheduled job, and we're working with historic and daily jobs usually. And what that means is you can collect historical data if the data is available historically. So if you have data that's been collected over a period of time previously, then you can actually collect that data. It makes sense to collect certain types of data. Other types of data not so much, and I'll also explain that a little bit. And then what you would do after you collect it historically until the present, you would set up a daily collection that starts collecting from that point forward. So it's just automated. And then once you have the indicators and you have collected your scores, then you can actually present all of that on a dashboard on widgets that can be visualized. The question here, reporting versus analytics. So what's the difference? And it should be at this point. So I showed you the graph there of what performance analytics can show you. So with reporting, here I have just have a simple incident sample report. If we wanted to know which ones are the open incidents right now or the active ones, we would just create a report that go to the incident table, maybe filter for active is true, and we would see all the incidents that are active right now. But this doesn't really tell us which ones were open a month ago or 3 months ago. It's not like, so the difference here is that this here and performance analytics graph, it's almost as if you had done exactly what I just did here, click run, and then you had captured that and put it as a point here on a graph, and doing that every single day. So performance analytics is essentially automating that. It's capturing that snapshot over time, so then we can see the number of open incidents and how they have varied over time. It's just, one is a snapshot, you just get the data as it is right now, and the other one, it's how the data looks over time, so that you can create trends and then make decisions based on that information.
Hey, David, real quick. Are there any limitations on what tables you can report against in PA?
Not really, but it's not recommended. For example, like ServiceNow doesn't recommend really like on some of the log tables doing kind of like reporting, but I mean, technically
Sure.
you can report on pretty much any table. Just some of them have so much data.
One other question for you, David. Is it possible to do kind of complex calculations on data? So say basically having to divide two numbers to get to another number. Is that a possibility within PA?
Absolutely, yeah, and we'll get to that with but I'll show you. So yes, we can do that, and those are called formula indicators in performance analytics. So we can, so the way to think about these, and I'll just click on any here. You're getting, and it'll make more sense once I go over the automated indicators, but we have, well, you get a result with an automated indicator. So the number of closed requested items canceled, that's something you can measure. We can look at the number of requested items that were canceled on a given day and get a number for that. Let's pretend that number is 5, and then here, number of closed requested items, then that's 10. So if we multiply that by 10 by 100 to get a percentage, then we would see that it's 50%. So we can certainly do calculations. We can get these results and divide them or multiply them, or pretty much do what you want here with this box here.
Awesome.
You can do math on them.
Was that most of these already out of the box if they have performance analytics enabled and they can just go to these dashboards? And was that IT Hub before that you had to like open incidents? Is that out of the box as well? And is all this in like New York release or?
Yeah, so I'll clarify that. So if you get, this is a demo instance, so there's a lot of demo data here, but usually
Right.
if you have a customer instance, you will not have all of this enabled. So the first step would be activating the plugin, the relevant plugin for, let's say if you wanted a change management dashboards, then you would go to that plugins list and you would search for change management, and then you would enable the dashboards and the indicators. But then the missing step there is you still need to collect the data so that
Right.
you can see, they're just going to be blank dashboards.
For running a scheduled job.
Exactly. So then you collect the historical data and set up the daily collection so that it collects from that point forward. And then you're actually going to start seeing some dashboards with data in them.
Mm-hmm. So that first one that you had was that incident one? I think it's in your second tab, or
This one, the
not your
IT
second
executive,
dashboard. The I saw a hub somewhere.
the analytics hub, you mean? Yeah. So when you click into any of these,
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can get to this analytics hub where you can analyze your indicators and
Copy. And that's just all around data pretty much.
exactly.
Got you. Okay. Now all this is, like I said, out of the box. And do you think, does New York or Orlando have any new stuff, or is it pretty much all the same?
Yeah, so actually, so
I
let me
mean,
go.
I know
It's
that probably got that full in your thread, so I'll probably ask another question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad you're asking about this now because this is actually this slide. So in versions prior to Madrid, you had a different visualization here. It was called scorecards. And then in starting in Madrid, Analytics Hub was released. And the differences here. So this is what it used to look like. This is what scorecards used to look like. And I mean, it may look familiar to some of you and
Yeah.
who've used performance analytics in the past. And now it looks like this. So this is just make this a little bigger here. It looks kind of like this, where you can get the score for the current period up here. So right now we're looking at April 29th here. And then you can also, any breakdowns that are available for this data, and this is all configurable. You can create new ones or use existing ones. This is how you want to slice the data. So you have the breakdowns here, and then there are a lot of different features here. Like you can create targets, thresholds, and targets are like if you want to reach something in the future, or a threshold would be something like you could create a global threshold that applies to everyone, or a personal one just for you. So if you wanted to know when a certain indicator reaches an all-time high or all-time low, you could be notified. Or a target if you if for example, if by I don't know, June 24th you wanted to hit, what is this total incident resolution cost, maybe we wanted to be at 50K, then that's a target we could aim for. And then here we also have, so the visualizations, you can apply some you can visualize this differently. It doesn't, and then you can also put labels. Kind of messy with this one specifically, but there's a lot to play around with here. And it's just an easier way, because when you have a widget, if we go back to that widget, it's just displayed this way. And this is perfect for anyone who maybe isn't interested in digging into the data so much. But if you really want to dig into it, you have the opportunity to click into it and visualize it differently. You could also apply time series, which, for example, if you wanted to do it by quarter instead of by day or by week or by month, you can see the sum here by quarter. And if someone was interested, someone you're creating the dashboard for, they wanted this visualization on the dashboard so they don't have to go in here and modify it, then you can also do that for them. So it's very I guess flexible in that regard. Chart options and the aggregation of the data, that's a time series, and the time frame as well. You can select how long, how much you want to. If you just wanted to see May, then you can apply that as well. Maybe do it daily at that point if you want to see every single day in May what the cost was, the daily incident resolution cost. Yeah, and then breakdowns. So let's go to another one here. Well, you can change the date as well. We were just looking for at April 29th before. You can change the date.
Yeah, it's Adolfo. I have a question. So, um, with the views in the analytics hub, are all of those available to set up as a widget as well?
So the widgets, you set them up here on the dashboard, and that's kind of like the default visualization that you select for a dashboard for anyone just opening the dashboard. But once you go into the analytics hub, you can modify it for yourself. It doesn't save it for everyone else.
If you found a view in the hub that you liked better than the one that was already on the widget, if you could set that as
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can create a new widget here that shows it that way. So yeah, it by all means, you just have to create the widget. And the next feature here to show is the score sheets. So when scores are collected, if we go to, let's go to the unautomated indicator here. So like the number of closed incidents. I'll show you the score sheet first, and then we'll go into how these work. So how it all fits together and how it all works. Okay, so here you have a link for the Analytics Hub. That's what we were just looking at. So this would show you the Analytics Hub for this indicator, closed incidents. Then if you want to see the scores. So when the collection runs, it seems like there hasn't been a collection for this one. But when the collection runs here, it would, let's see if we have another one. Okay, so this one has scores. So when the collection runs, you would get, see how it's breaking it down. So we have each of these are breakdowns. So this is how you're slicing the data. In this case, there's a COE for different HR cases. So, or you could think of it, maybe this one's easier to do, like a category. You're categorizing these HR records different ways. You can see out of the 27, how many of those are HR system support or payroll administration. That's essentially how you can visualize. It's a different way of visualizing all the scores being collected by the job. And the data collection, just quickly show you an example here of the two main jobs. So we have the historic collection, where you would collect. So when you implement this, you would run the historic collection, and you would decide here whether you go a certain number of days ago. You can also do fixed. So if you know that you want to collect from maybe October 1st until yesterday, then you could also just collect data for that time range. So and then here you also have the ability to, you can set these to inactive if you don't want to collect them. Cases where you would use that is if you, for example, you create a new indicator, you had already collected all this data. You don't necessarily need to recollect all this data because you may be overwriting some of the daily data that you had already collected. So what you could do is just set these to false, and then just run that collection for the one new indicator. Or if you just, maybe you created a new breakdown for just one or two indicators, then you would also do that, and you would be able to pick here. So once you go into the collections, you can also select any breakdowns you may want to exclude from the collection. So you're not collecting data you already have. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are some breakdowns that, for example, you can usually think of breakdowns like as fields on a record, usually. So there are some that aren't, and I'll go a little bit over that as well. But for example, assignment group, for incidents, it wouldn't make sense to do a historic collection for assignment groups for incident, because those can change over time, over the life of the incident. So ultimately, all you would be collecting is the last assignment group that's on that incident. For any indicator that's, for example, open incidents, it wouldn't make any sense to collect the assignment group. On closed incidents, that's fine, because it's unlikely that the assignment group changes once the incident is closed. So those are some of the considerations you have to take with the historic collections. And then for the daily ones, these are simpler. So you can feel free to set all of the breakdowns if you want to collect all of the breakdowns. And you would just activate it, right? Make sure that you activate it. And I would recommend doing the collection as soon as you can after midnight. The reason being that you're waiting for the previous day to end so that you can collect all the data for that day. So I mean, you could do it at 6 p.m. if you wanted, but then you're not going to be able to see the data for the previous day until 6 p.m. that day, which doesn't make much sense when you could just do it earlier in the day, maybe between 1 a.m. or around 1 a.m. or so.
David, real quick question on the collection time. So what do you do in the case where it's a multinational company? Do you just pick their most common time zone and set to run that, or whatever the system is set to, I guess?
Yeah, I usually go by what the system time zone is set up as. I explain to them that it's ultimately we want to do it at a time when there's not much activity in the instance. So I've run into those cases, but ultimately we do have to pick a time, and the best time would be once everyone's day is over. So I guess you could do close to the international dateline as you could, so that make sure that everyone's day is over, and then collect it in that case. Yeah, ultimately you have to pick a time, and it just helps to pick a time when there's less activity in the instance.
Sure.
So now let's go into how these all work together. So we'll start with the indicator source. So here for this indicator, you'll notice that there's a reference field here called indicator source. I'll go all the way to the source now. And by source, I mean the source of the data. So here's where we define what is a closed incident. And what's really important here is that we have a date and time field. So closed is one of those. So this is when, so there's a business rule on the incident table that populates this field once the incident is closed. So you see that happens out of the box. You don't have to worry about that. We could even do open incidents. That's definitely going to have some number of open incidents or new incidents even. So you can get a sense for the different, okay, so open, and then, so what we're defining here is what is an open incident, what is a new incident, what's a closed one. And you'll notice that they all have date and time fields. And the reason for that is, so the system can essentially categorize these on the appropriate day. So the system would be able to tell what is an open incident, or what it by looking at the time on a given day, by looking at the open and the resolve time. So as you're doing the historic collection, if, for example, this one was opened on January 1st and the resolve time is January 31st, then any time in between those two, or actually, let me pick a date in the past because we are in January 31st. So let's say December 1st, December 31st. Any time between those two would be considered open. Any time after the resolved date and time, it just wouldn't be considered open anymore. And here you can get a sense of how many records right now, so open today, and these are just conditions, right? So we're getting the records that we'll be working with, or really that all of these indicators are going to be using. So here we're getting the source data, and then with that source data, you can build all of these indicators. You can take a look at the number of open incidents that were unassigned, or the number of reopened incidents, and all of these additional conditions are applied here in the additional conditions tab. So assigned to is empty. That's an unassigned incident. So the first part then when you're creating these is to get your indicator source. Make sure you discuss with the customer what is an open incident for them, or whatever type of record you're working with. What do you consider a closed HR case? What do you consider? So those are important conversations to have, so that they have faith in the data that you're presenting to them. And once you have that, then you can start building a lot of these indicators. And you can, so we won't get too in depth into all the different things you can do here, but just so you're aware of what's available, you don't necessarily just have to count the number. You can also do sometimes this is helpful. They were trying to find out the time worked for some of their records, and there's a related list. Some of you may be familiar with the time worked related list. They wanted to know the sum of the time worked for a particular type of record for a given day. So then you would do sum, and then you would select that field that's capturing the time, whether it captures the times right away, or sometimes you have to convert it. Maybe it captures it in seconds. So if we went to the in time worked, there's a field called time in seconds, and then they actually wanted to see it in hours. So what you would have to do that is just a simple script that would convert seconds to hours, so that when they go to the to the widget to visualize the data, they can see it in hours as opposed to seconds, which is would just be easier to make decisions on. So that's something you have to keep in mind too. Like, how do we help? I mean, that's actually one of the main things, as I mentioned at the beginning. Like, you're helping these personas just make business decisions. So actionable business decisions, so that they can improve their businesses. That's one thing to keep in mind when you're working with performance analytics. For breakdowns, we can you can see some of them here, and this is how you slice the data. So as you saw before in the score here, these are priority would be, that's a field on the incident record, and it has these values, these choices here: critical, high, moderate. So the goal here is to try to break down the data. So state here for the this is number of open incidents. When you create it, it works similar to an indicator source. So you have a source, you have to define what is this. So what is an incident state? And for that, it's not just going to the incident field, so it's to the state field on the incident. You're actually going to the choices, and you're putting the conditions here to define what are the available choices. And once you have that, what's also important, you see how several tables could use the same breakdown source. An example would be assignment group. Maybe you have a general groups like assignment group, and then you have to map it. So what you have to do here is you have to map the breakdowns, essentially telling the system where it should be looking for those breakdowns that we defined in the breakdown source. That's what you're doing here. So for the incident, here's the breakdown mapping record. You're just putting the table where you will find those state values, and then the field. And then in situations where it's not so clear, for example, it's not a field and maybe it's a range like age. So here's age. Here you have to use a script so that you can tell the system, since there's no field, for example, on incident, that where a user where you would select the age range for like how old an incident is, it would do it based on so if we go in here, here you're just selecting the field that you will be using to calculate this age, and you're getting the score based on when it was opened and when the score was collected. And you're doing the calculation, I think it was, if you're, for example, collecting it in hours or days or seconds. This one's days, so that's why you see that there. And to define those ranges, you would do it in a place called bucket groups. So here, bucket groups, this is where you would define, so incident, age ranges, day ranges, you would do it here. So see how you're assigning a start and an end value that goes with each age range, and then with the script, then you can assign based on the value, then you can assign it to one of these. And these can be modified, of course, if you, for example, wanted to do between 31 and 60 days and 61 and 90 days. You could create more and just make sure that you define the start and the end for it. Then you can, let's see here. Then you can visualize that data. We can actually see all the indicators that use it here. Let's open a few here, hoping that one of them has data. But you would essentially see a breakdown. So you could see how many of those 10 incidents for that day, how many of those are 10 days old, or see like here. So here you can see how many of them are 30,000 hours, or sorry, how many of these, essentially how they break down by age. So there are a few here that more than 90 days, there's certain numbers of hours for that. So that's a whole goal there, because sometimes you don't have all the data or everything you want to break down by on a field. Then you can also create these bucket groups. And breakdown relations, this is when you have hierarchical data, then it helps when you can click into one of these values, and then you can see, for example, in locations, if you had if you had regions and states and cities and I don't know, building, room, you could also navigate through those here by clicking into a room and then going into the building and then going into the room and seeing that data. And those are more advanced topics, and then hopefully one day in the future we can for those interested in more advanced topics, we can go over those that kind of functionality. I actually have a dashboard here that I haven't, so I created one. This I'll go over this in a little bit. It's just to show you the different types of visualizations. So manual indicators, you would use these in a situation where, for example, you're not collecting the data in ServiceNow. The typical example is like if you're collecting this in another system, like the number of phone calls. I mean, eventually it would probably be better to just build an integration and just bring that data over in ServiceNow. But if you need something temporary where you don't have that, you could just manually enter those scores into a score sheet. I entered this data just for demonstration purposes. If you had phone calls and maybe some cities, you could enter it manually, and then you can, if you go to the Analytics Hub, then you would be able to visualize that if you wanted to do something like that. That's honestly, manual indicators, I haven't seen many customers using it, but the option is there if you'd like to use it. And then formula indicators. These are cool because you can get percentages or averages doing the calculations in this formula box here, and then you can show these on widgets. So you apply these to widgets on a dashboard. So we went over targets, thresholds, elements, filters. That's a useful one as well. These are essentially so that you can, when you go to the Analytics Hub, you can then sometimes you can have a lot of results. You can also you have the option here of applying. So if you create a filter like the regions, if you have a breakdown that uses that, and you have, let's say you have more regions, that you have like hundreds of regions, you could just create an elements filter where you apply it, and then it filters for maybe the regions that you're the manager of, or the regions, or you could just specifically define which regions, maybe Northeast, and you have just, or I mean, you get the idea. It's essentially a way to filter all of these values so that you don't have to get overwhelmed by the number of values that you may have. All right, so let's get to the dashboard now, and some of the different visualizations that you have available. So the score one is it's a pretty easy one to see. I mean, it's a score. It's kind of like the report one where you just see a score. You do have the option for this one to show a real-time score. You don't have that ability for every widget type, so that's one big advantage here. For example, here you wouldn't be able to see the real-time score on a bar chart, but you can here. And then you can see the trend in the background, but you can always just go in here and like I mentioned before, you can just play around with the visualization and the time range if you want to see specific data here, or you can enable data labels as well. You can see them right there. That's the score type of visualization. The next one this is a list of, if you wanted to, for any reason, list different types of indicators, like number of new security incidents, and then you can see kind of like a trend here for that data. If this is daily, you could also do monthly or quarterly. Here, stacked columns. This is a breakdown indicator. So this one is great if someone wants to see exactly this, like a breakdown, like the states, and you can see them on. It's actually easier to. You could do the same in the time series one. It's just easier to configure. I'll go into the widget where you would configure this. So you click into the pencil, and all you do is define the indicator, then the breakdown, and then you can do some additional configuration here, like if you want to show date ranges or how you want to visualize this data. It doesn't have to be stacked column. It could be any of these other ones, and then you can display it however it's easier for the audience to visualize this data. Here, this is a time series one, so similar to the other one, it's just different configuration. You can see the time, and you can actually apply different. These are two separate indicators: the number of open HR cases up here, and then you're putting another indicator on the same widget, and you're defining it here below in the widget indicators. And then I'll just go quickly over these. So pivot here, this is great when you're trying to do two breakdowns, like maybe the assigned twos and some category here or product. Then you can easily visualize it in here in a pivot widget. This one's also really cool. I've used this one more on like if you wanted to find out how your what kind of value you're getting out of your service portal, or what are people searching for, or even in virtual agent. I created some for virtual agent as well. People are typing certain words, and you just want to have an idea of what the more frequent ones are. Like this one is 112 occurrences. You can visualize that in a word cloud here. And if you wanted to visualize any processes, this workbench widget is also really useful. And lastly, for those who are really interested in this topic, there's, of course, ServiceNow provides training, and these are the classes ServiceNow offers. Documentation, of course, ServiceNow docs. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the questions. Bye, everyone.